learning now the Manachochem. Today we are actually going to learn in the text. Yesterday I think we had a great Fabrengen, like Yisr likes to call our learning of my Morim. Yesterday was more of a Fabrengen, but it was very important. I don't see it as a Fabrengen, although it could be used as a Fabrengen. I see it as really understanding some of the background to the Sefer that we're learning in, which is very important. And there'll be more of those things that come up as we go along. So stay tuned. Don't give up so quick. Pei Tzadik Hey, last paragraph. V'im Toimar, Rabbi Yoel says, and if you'll say, he's speaking to this, Satmar, Shita and all that. Mikivin Shiyadua, the Shita of not accepting a non-religious Jew and calling them a kofer and a posheya, a sinner, and a Russia. I don't like saying it, so I hope I don't have to repeat that many times. And if you'll say, he says, and if you'll say that since there are proofs that come from the Shita, in other words, he said before, Yoel said before, the question is the argument that you present come from the Shita, or does it come from the Torah? That's, so Yoel is removing himself from an emotional response and looking, and he wants the reader to look at it from an objective perspective. And he summarized it earlier in the last two shiurim that we had on this. Whether your stance, is it your shtick? Is it your shita? Is it Williamsburg? Is it Lubavitch? Or is it Torah? And he says that's the barometer to test if anything is emes and true, or it's your own thing. And even if it comes from your Shita and your Rebbe and all that, so be it. And like he said, who says you can't argue with a Rebbe Shita if you could bring proof of the Torah? And I gave a whole share about that. What? Yoni? Yes.
I have an older friend that became Baal Tshuva, like in his 60s or 70s.
Yeah.
So he has a joke. His joke is, so what cult are you part of? Are you part of the cult of Lubavitch? Are you cult of Satmar?
Right. Right. Exactly. So cult is a very harsh word, and I'm not going to go into that. What are the mechanics of a cult? I mean, that's another discussion. Emmanuel Shachat, Olav Sholem, who was a PhD in philosophy, he spoke a lot about this Nekuda. The difference between a cult, and he knew the cult business very well because that was one of his specialties, to bring back Yidden from cults versus a Shita. A Shita. Now, again, I'm not now a linguistic and English major to tell you, well, that's what cult means. Maybe it does, but from our Torah perspective, there's a difference between, in my humble opinion, between a cult and a Shita. Okay? In other words, a Shita doesn't say beat up the person or kill the person if he doesn't follow 100%. I'm not talking about the Lev Torah, because Lev Torah is more in line with a cult. Yes, I would agree. But even the Satmar, I think that the Torah Karta, they weren't, to a point where if you don't follow my way, I'm going to kill you. No, they say just don't walk in Meir Sharim in a way that's against our standards. That they're not telling you that you have to adopt their standards. The counter argument that the streets belong to the public, not to you. But so in that way they're conquering the streets. So you could say, well, that's a cult. They in the street you must walk that way. Okay, but so Yaini, I'm saying it's a good joke. I understand it. I've heard it many times. Trust me, just like you have. But it's not necessarily it's a cult. It's a Shita. It's a Shita. So the question is this Shita, Yaini said, is this Shita Torah, or is this Shita we? And then we find support in Torah. That's what Rabbi Yoel said we should look at. So now he's saying, what?
Or is it Mishakas?
Well, Mishigas is already a third thing. Mishigas. Rabbi Yoel doesn't want to say it here. Well, he did say the word Meshuga before. He didn't want to say it before, but really, if the Shita is I and we, it is Mishigas. It's your Mishigas. But you understand, there is Mishigas, which is like, there's no source for Torah. So we have three things. I'm glad you said the word Mishigas. We have Mishigas, which is totally no Torah support. 1 second, sir. Then we have a Shita, which is my own Shita, our own Shita, and it has Torah support because I later find Torah justification to justify what I and we want to do. And then there is the third, pure objective, which is Torah. And from Torah, it develops into a Shita. Yes, sir.
I wanted to say there's an expression that the difference between a Shita and a Shota is that a Yid who says, my Shita is the only Shita, and the Shita takes the small Yid and makes himself a big tall Yud and turns into a Shota.
Oh, that's a great word. I never heard it. That's worth $100. I might make a 2-minute inspiration this week from that word. That's great. When did you hear that? Recently or years ago? Okay.
That's from years and years ago.
Okay, good. Very, very good. Taking the Yud and making it into a Vav. A Vav.
Similar.
What?
Yep. Similarly, I heard
no good connection. Okay, let's go on.
That somebody who says, or who only learned...
whatever, you're cutting in and out another time. Let's continue inside. So Rabbi Yoel says, second line, page Tzadik Hey, 95, last paragraph, second line. Hatshuva bezehi pshuta. The response, Rabbi Yoel says, to know whether it's, like Yoni says, Mishigas, Shita, or Torah, okay? We'll just simplify it with those three categories. As I've written before, he says, Elu sheyesh lahem shita keduma, those that have a preconceived, that's what shita keduma means, a preconceived shita, in the parentheses, that are taken from ideas from the street. Today is Reb Shleimer's Yortzeit. Reb Shleimer ben Naftali is Rabbi Lichtig in Gan Eden, right? Reb Shleimer always said when they bothered him, they shepherded him, he said, I could just tell you, my music wasn't taken from rock and roll and country in the 50s and the 40s. Reb Shleimer made up his own music. So all your big talkers with all your big complaints, most of your music, even till today, is taken from Goyish music, okay? And I don't want to mention names, but it's a fact. I mean, Avram Fried might be an exception. No, he's actually not an exception. Benny Friedman, whatever. In other words, they're not like some of the Israeli singers where it's clear it's coming, and even American singers. But anyway, Shleimer was mamish, he made up his own lyrics and own tune. It's his original. So that's what it's saying here. Is your shita taken from ideas from the street? He watched the Fonzarelli on the Fonz over there, the 50s and 60s, that show, or the Ed Sullivan show, and he came up with a creative idea, and he put it into a story or into a song. That means that you're taking your shita from the street. Call a spade a spade. You're a great personator, and you know how to dress it up, and you know how to make it feel Jewish. But b'nekudah, b'ikaron, b'yesod, in its foundation, it's mirachov, it's from the street. And that's something, by the way, as we develop and grow ourselves and children and grandchildren, it's a very important nekudah when they ask, what, in other words, what's so wrong to become, familiar with so many things that are out there? And this is one of the answers. the issue is whether later in life will these issues create for you your model. And if it's not a Torah model, it's not a Torah model. So that's why there's a sensitivity to issues, to issues of the youth. And that is why we have the disagreements in the community, when children are young. So the Rebbe, for example, came out with something that is no one else, hardly anyone ever spoke about or suggested. Children shouldn't see pictures of non-kosher animals. It's like, it's unheard of. But the Rebbe explained it. He explained it with a Ramban, and he explained it that there's animals and birds and that have bad midos, and like the Ramban says, and that's why some of them are not kosher. They're not kosher because Hashem says not kosher, but it happens to be that you look at their nature, it's no good. So why should a child identify with a certain bird that has a not nice midah? That is a kind of a far out type of thinking, but the Rebbe said that. So a Lubavitcher is, adamant about it, and everyone else isn't, and I understand. But let's look at the approach, right? This is what I want to show. The approach is that since a child is so young and impressionable, you want him to have machshavas tahiros, to have pure thoughts. So everyone knows about, not looking at things you're not supposed to. We teach our children that from youth. Okay, that we know, right? That's Shulchan Aruch. But what about, this? No one would think of it, right? So in every community, there is this argumentation. What is considered rayonos merachoiv? It's a very important parenthesis here, I feel. Ideas from the street, or they're ideas from Torah. And that's what the value. And that's as we as parents and grandparents that's the barometer. Is what my son and daughter are reading in school, in college, in high school, is it rayonos merachoiv or rayonos mehatorah? So, for example, another example, the Rebbe wrote to Rabbi Hutner, the Frierdiker Rebbe wrote to Rabbi Hutner, complimenting him that in Chaim Berlin, in 1943-44, before you and I were born, he complimented him for getting rid, in high school, of certain books that had, heresy ideas like evolution and things like that, the age of the world. And Rabbi Hutner was only one second. He was one of the only Rabbanim. This Rabbi Hutner, who later, didn't feel great about Chabad. It's another story, right? In the 40s, he was tight with the Frierdiker Rebbe and the Rebbe during the 40s, and he listened to what the Frierdiker Rebbe said, and the Frierdiker Rebbe writes to Zalman Garari, a chassid, to ask Rabbi Hutner to get Rabbi Moshe Feinstein, who had the yeshiva, was involved with the yeshiva in the Lower East Side, the same yeshiva that exists today, right? Rabbi Moshe's yeshiva, and another for yeshiva, and Torah V'das, to get them to get rid of the same books in their high school course. Who else was thinking about that? Very few people. But that's not the point. That's not the point. My Rebbe, you was thinking, that's not the point. The point is that the question of, what was the Frierdiker Rebbe's idea? He's not telling you to close your high school department. No. Lubavitcher Yeshiva had a high school department too. He's telling you to read the books. Another example. My wife's grandfather, Reb Zalman Serebransky, who was the Frierdiker Rebbe, the Rebbe Shliach to Australia, to Melbourne, opened the yeshiva. My wife told me he was a Russian Yid, he learned himself English well, was a very intelligent man and a very thoughtful man, and he would read through every book that the school called for in their curriculum. In the bathroom, otherwise, he read the books. Again, I don't know how many books there were, but he wanted to make sure. So this is something that's alluded to in all this. Hillel, you wanted to say something.
I was just going to offer myself up as a cautionary tale in this regard, because, here I am, close to 70, and you play me 3 notes from a pop song from the 60s, I can remember all the words, but I can't just remember a paragraph of Torah that I just learned 2 minutes ago,
Yeah, well, listen, and I didn't grow up with that, but what I learned in my youth, you know, some of that I remember, and what I learn now, it's not that way. So I relate to what you're saying, but. And I've always told you of here, you know, that in that eighth grade class, when the teacher brought in that song from Frank Sinatra, you know, those boots are made for walking. I'm here 61, I'm going on 62, and I remember it, you know. And we were not listening to rock and roll. So I understand that. Who wanted to say something? Someone else wanted to say? Is there someone? I don't know. No. Okay, let's go weiter. Yeah, Moshe?
I remember.
Go ahead, Yoni. Yeah. Yoni, go ahead.
I remember that in the yeshiva, there was, in the curriculum, there was evolution, and we were taught to just not look at it. Literally just, it was, even if it's going to be on the region,
right.
Even if you're going to fail, we didn't learn it.
Like, okay.
It was in the curriculum, it was in the book.
Right.
That was it.
Right. So whatever. I don't know if, you know, if they changed. I don't know. Go ahead, Moshe.
Yeah, Rabbi Delvin, what we're learning right now, what Gil's talking about is interesting because in light of the that piece that the New York Times did not long ago, that they really came out.
Oh.
Really, you know, highly critical. I mean, okay, putting aside New York Times, their agenda, not agenda.
Right.
But a piece that was, you know, extremely critical.
You're talking about whether there is a Bayra Olam and all that, right? A creator, that piece you're talking about?
No, they came out in the New York Times sometime within the last 6 weeks.
Oh no, I don't know. What?
They came out with a huge article, being very critical of the results of different, you know, from schools in the New York area, in terms of like Hasidic schools.
Yes, I know about that.
For the first time, they published the whole thing. Part of it was in Yiddish in the New York Times. So it's a big thing.
Okay, so what's your point?
Well, my point is that it's interesting that Rabbi is speaking about this because you have on the one hand probably schools, certainly at this time and still, I'm sure, that are teaching things that could be very questionable. What are they teaching, you know, in terms of secular studies, the perspective, who's teaching ideas, you know, are they congruent with Torah ideas, etc., Torah, Hashkafa, etc. And then you have at the same time, probably in a lot of schools, that they're probably teaching so little or nothing of secular studies.
Yes. Let's it's a good point. Let's leave that for another discussion. It's a good discussion, and we should have it sometime. In Mitzvah Hashem. Because I do have what to say on it. I mean, I'm sure you do too. And it's something, but yes, this touches on that Nakuda, 100%. This touches on that Nakuda. And that's what happened here. You know, you're kind of forcing me to get into it because I'm more passionate about it. That's what happened over here. What happened over here and why it blew up is, in my humble opinion, is because we have extremists. We have extremes. If we didn't have extremes, Torah V'das, which was the yeshiva, no longer, but it was the yeshiva in the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, that was the all-inclusive yeshiva and you know, for everyone. I'm not talking about for Hasidim, real Hasidim, no. But yeah, in the 40s, 50s also. So, Torah V'das never had an issue. As far as I know, they never had an issue. And things flowed. Lubavitch Yeshiva, which started in 40 and 46, and I attended in the 60s and 70s, we never had an issue. I went to high school. And I remember in our history course, the teacher spoke about Hinduism and Buddhism. I remember, and you know, and it was the first time I never heard of those things in my Torah classes, and I asked, and I was told, you know, some of it's Avodah Zarah, And and I asked why are we being taught that, and I was told, listen, this is a part of the course, and just don't, Yoni said before, they told him, to figure not read it, and in our case they said, just go on, don't make, don't be chutzpah to the teacher, you understand? He was a secular, I remember his name, Mr. Pollack, I hope he's still alive. He was, a Jew, wasn't religious, nice guy, and he did his job. So what you do, throw eggs at him for teaching us about Hinduism? This was the history course. I remember I went to my principal and he said, listen, I didn't tell you to go to high school. Your father wants you to go. You have a mitzvah, kibbud aveim. You go to high school. If this is the course, and then you use your brains. In other words, what's happened, Moshe, is that it became an extreme. Oli Torah. The Lubavitcher school, today, which is the main school in Krona, where the Jewish center is on Eastern Parkway, right? They started in 1956, and the Rebbe spoke then about not teaching children secular studies until the age of 9. And the Rebbe explained that a child's mind is pure, and like Hillel said, he remembers everything. So you want the first 9 years, they should get it all Torah and Kedusha, and then later. So Lubavitch Yeshiva, my yeshiva, we did learn English in elementary. So came along a Yid, a Michal Teitelbaum, a Russian chassid, a Baal Mesiras Nefesh. I knew him. And he said, I'm going to do it the way the Rebbe said. And the Rebbe's brother-in-law, is doing it with the Rashus of the previous Rebbe that he has English. That's his issue. It's not my, I don't have to, he made a yeshiva for everybody. It's true. Our yeshiva started for everyone, not just for Lubavitchers. We have mostly not Lubavitchers. Do you know that our yeshiva, Lubavitch Yeshiva, had most of the boys in the 40s and 50s, and even going to the 60s, were not Lubavitchers. My uncle, who went there, he didn't have a beard. A lot of guys didn't have beards. I don't want to go, so...
My cousin Chili.
Yechili was in my class. When he was he came from a Bell's home, but he wasn't the father. I'm not sure had a beard. I don't think he had a beard, right? Anyway, at the beginning of his life. So the point is,
no.
So Rabbi Michal Teitelbaum says that's good for you guys. I want all Taras HaKodesh is called, all purity, no English. Starts in Yeshiva Oli Torah, fledgling yeshiva. Today, it has 2,000 students in the entire campus, and it's the yeshiva bastion of Chabad today is Oli Torah, right? So they took over. They didn't learn English. How did they get away? I don't know. But what I'm saying is they kept things in a way where I'm sure as Chabad Chassidim, they used their seichel. They used their seichel. And I don't know the particulars, when, how, but when you just say it's my way, and you're taking money from the government, you see that's a big difference. Satmar and the Kleisenbergers and the Vizhnitzers and everyone else, you're mamish taking millions of dollars out of the U.S. government, and you don't follow their rules, and then you have some what happened over here? A guy, Muster, and a few others, opened an organization called Yafed, and they decided to snitch on the yeshivas, and they said that the reason why we are not religious today, and the reason why we were failures until we became not religious and started a new life is because of you not teaching us English. And I actually heard this from some of these people over the years, blaming the yeshiva because they didn't teach English. They were goof-offs, and they were outcasts, and they had to restart their life, and of course that meant not being religious, and therefore they're getting back now at the yeshivas, because they feel the yeshivas are ruining and hurting children. So, wer bist du? In Yiddish it means, wer bist du? Who are you? What are you sticking your nose in? Who asked you? No, because they have an axe to grind. But at the same time, if you take such adversity, you deal with it. Maybe I'm not sure, because if someone is out to get you, they're going to go all the way. But maybe you could have what's the word I'm looking for? You could have placated. Thank you. Placated muster and companies if you give them some room. And that's what it's all about, Moshe. What I'm saying is give room. Give room. Okay, some of the ideas are merchay, from the street. I understand. So what can we eliminate? What can we keep? Let's sit down and work this out. But when you go with an extreme, both extremes, no, nothing at all, or everything must be, you're not going to win. And that's a rule in life. Extremism breeds extremism. And that's where you have fallout and issues. At the same time, you have success. In other words, extremism, Satmar is so large. Every time I think about it, I can't wrap my head around it. They own this city, New York. They own it. It's amazing. This Satmar Rebbe got up yesterday. You read it on here, it's online. The one who said you should vote for Huckel versus Zeldin, right?
Aroinen.
And he got up and he defended it. And he basically said, ha-ha. He didn't say, ha-ha, I got you guys. She won. And guess what? He didn't say this. And my pocketbook, my community is going to get lots of money. You guys were the frimmies. Zeldin, Huckel's a Democrat. She wants school, English in the schools. Now you have it. So he's walking away. My pocket's gonna get stuffed. My yeshivas will have whatever they want. And you guys are left. And I'm the king. You have to come to me. He doesn't say that, but I'm just telling you. So what did he do? He used seichel. So you'll say, well, that's not a Torah approach. It is and it isn't. If you're doing it with a rishus, with a self and ego, it's not. But if you're doing it because you know you need to compromise somewhere and you need to placate, and again, I'm not saying that he's right and that's I'm just saying the idea. So that's when you say, what Rabbi Yoel writes. Rabbi Yoel himself was, in his thinking, kind of an extremist. In other words, is it a Torah way or not? But even if you don't go to that extreme, this is an important quality for every issue in life. If you want to know in business, story I've told you, my friend calls me one day. We used to learn Tanya in Midtown Manhattan together. He calls me, he says, Rabbi Dalton, thank you for learning with me Tanya. So I say, I'm scheduled to come to you tomorrow. You could have told me, thank you, face to face. Why are you calling me up on the phone? He says, because I just came out of a business meeting, and he's in life insurance. And I had an ethical question whether it should be done or not, and it was about a lot of money, and I didn't know what to do, and all of a sudden it hit me. What would the Beinani do? And that's how he answered his question. And then I realized, who taught me about the Beinani? The Alter Rebbe, through our learning. So I'm saying to you, thank you for teaching me, Tanya, and I should be able to integrate it into my thinking. So in my business, I'll know what the Beinani would do. And whatever he did. I don't know. My point is...
Sounds like that would be a great bumper sticker.
The point is that, if a person is himself an emes mensch and a Torah mensch, he's going to make a decision regardless of how much money it's involved here, that he can benefit. Is it ethical or not? And if he concludes that it's not ethical, and a Beinani of Tanya, meaning a Yid, Beinani is really the ultimate Jew, that the ultimate Jew would not do this because it's not in spirit of God, he doesn't do it. Regardless of how much money and how much fame, you just don't do it. And that's not easy. It's not an easy thing because the temptation is very great. Whether it's money, whether it's fame, whatever it is, it's something that Rabbi Yoel would talk to us about this in yeshiva, in his Fabrengens, and not in more emotional words, and but more in intellectual thought. But this is something that he created in us to think, to change our thinking, to think this way. Don't think money. Don't think fame. Don't think honor. Don't think I. Think God. Think Torah. Think emes. And that's the barometer. Hevra, you got a second Fabrengen.
No, really, it's a lot to think of. Like a lot to think on what you just said. It's not so pashut. It's a lot of stuff.
It's not so pashut, but it's good. It's good to think about it exactly, and hopefully to implement. Yes, Moshe.
Yeah, I just want to say what you just, Rabbi Zalman, you just said. That sounds like a true. You know, it sounds and it smells healthy.
Yeah.
As opposed to when you were describing a couple minutes ago about the Satmar Rebbe, right? What you said, right? Like it did not smell. It just doesn't. Sometimes something. Has a smell.
Right, but Moshe, that was my right. But Moshe, that was my spin on the Satmar Rebbe. What he was saying, I'm just. Let's. It was my spin. I'm not Chas v'Sholom saying he didn't say that. I'm just telling you it's my spin. That's all.
Okay, fair. Okay, but so all I'm just saying is that it's just such a sometimes you this is something I ever since I began the moment I started to become more observant. There was a litmus test. When I heard the way someone was speaking, when I saw what someone was doing, when I saw how they behaved, how they looked at, it was like, does it feel like it's true? Does it emanate? Is it real? Or something just didn't smell right?
Right. I conclude with one story that I've told you, but again worth mentioning. There was a chassid, Rabbi Avram Mayor Drizin. There's a Chabad family, the Drizin family. So the grandfather, great-grandfather, he learned in Lubavitch, and he was a chassid, and he knew how to learn a lot. He's a parsha for himself. And he was a shtickle mashpia of mine. I had the schus, he came to my vort, and I heard a lot of things from him, and I've shared things. Anyway, so I heard, what I'm telling you now, I heard from Rabbi Gansfi. Rabbi Gansfi is a dayan on a Bezdin, I think in Queens. He is a Lakewood and Panovich student. He himself comes from Chassidim. So he's a big mix, and he's a big Talmud Chacham, and he's a nice person. And he lives here a few blocks away, and 11, 12 at night, many times we would talk a half an hour, and I heard things from him which I appreciated. So he told me once that Rabbi Avram came to Lakewood. Rabbi Avram Mayor was related to Rabbi Beryl Schwartzman. Rabbi Beryl Schwartzman was the son-in-law before the divorce to Rabbi Aaron Cutler's daughter, right? Okay? And it's a whole story about the divorce, not now, maybe never, because it's not whatever. Beryl was a Yid from Neville, from Russia, with Lubavitch Chassidim at 16 Shtiblach. So this was like Lubavitch town, and they were simple. They were known as Katsavim, butchers. They weren't, but they were so heartfelt Lubavitchers with a little mashke and a niggin and a tear. This was like Chabad in its best, in it. They used to say, from the time of the Mittler Rebbe, we say, Hallelujah, B'nevel, B'chinor, right, in the Hallelujah. Praise Hashem with the harps. So the Chassidim would say, from the time of the Mittler Rebbe, Hallelujah, B'nevel. Praise for God comes from our city, Nevel. Okay? So, if you might hear in Chabad, even today, I'm from Neville. I come from Neville Chassidim. I mean, that was like spitz, ooh, this is where real Chabad Chassidim are. Anyway, the real McCoy, not the Chabad BTs. I don't mean BTs, even us who are from families Chassidic for 151 years, but we weren't Chabad, but they were pure Chabad 150 years. Anyway, so Rebbe Schwarzman was a relative to Rabbi Avram. They were related. So Avram Mayor had more of a pass in Lakewood. Besides that, he was older, and he knew Rabbi Baruch Ber, and he knew the Rogachover, and he knew the Alter Slapotka. He knew them all, and he spoke to them. You know, in those days, there wasn't, the spoken learning. He almost went to Slobodka. So he was a universal figure and related to the Cutlers and to Lakewood, so he had it in. So he was once Farbrengen, I think it was in a sukkah. This is what Rabbi Gansvi tells me. He was Farbrengen in the sukkah. Must have been 100, 200 people there, a lot of chevra, and they're listening. And, he would take mashka. He was a real Russian Yid, and he could take a good drink, and he was animated, and he would speak and cry and talk. And he said, you guys are listening to me here, right? He said, yeah, it's a Farbrengen. He says, you probably think I want to make you into Lubavitcher, because that's always the, hey, what's a Lubavitcher think about? Become Chabad, become Lubavitch. No, that's an age-old accusation. Sometimes there was some truth to it, but Rabbi Yoel was not that way. Avraham Ayer was not that way. Frankly, I'm not that way. And there are many that are not that way, just whatever. So he says, no. We have enough Lubavitchers in 770. We don't need any more Lubavitchers. We have enough of our own to deal with. But he said, if you chevra want to see a Jew who's a Yiras Hashem and an emes Jew, come to 770 to see and listen to the Lubavitcher Rebbe. So that supports what Moshe just said. It's not about my party or your party. It's about emes and Torah. And that's the right approach. So you have that right approach, and I think all of us have that approach, and it's just we should keep on sharing that's what you should look for. And if that draws you to become a Bosner Chassid like Isser, gewaldig. No, gewaldig. If he finds emes over there more than Chabad or Breslov or this, so what? It's not a game here. Yeah. It's like and unfortunately, some of these Hasidus it's become like, you have to be only my Chassid. You have to be only my Chassid. If your neshama talks to you versus another Chassid, another Gadol, another Rav, go there. It doesn't mean you can't learn from them. You should learn other things from them. Okay, Chevra, have a great day. Monday, Mitzvah Shem, have a great Shabbos. We'll see everyone. Sei gesund. Bye-bye.
Good Shabbos.
The neshama should have an aliyah of Reb Shlomo ben Naftali.
Amen.